Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and absolutely delighted that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in our mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods, Audible, Podcast Addict, CastBox, Player FM, Boomplay, Ghana, wherever you find your favorite shows. Two wonderful guests for you today. Brian Anderson is up first. He is celebrating Sophie, two great new books, Jurassic and Frankenstein's Hound. Later in the show, we'll meet Grace Seo Chang. She is celebrating birthday soup. Hey, my friends, we are really excited. Reading with Your Kids podcast is returning to the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, November 9th and 10th. At the Stevens Convention Center in Rosemont, Illinois. Let your imagination come to life at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, the ultimate family play experience. Dive into hands-on fun with the hottest new toys and games, meet the inventors behind your favorite products, and even get a sneak peek at what will top holiday wish lists this year. From interactive play zones to exciting competitions and exclusive giveaways, there's something for every member of the family at the Chicago Toy and Game Fair. And don't miss the Young Inventor Challenge, where kids showcase their creativity and innovation. Who knows? You just might meet the next big inventor. Join us at the Donald E. Stevens Convention Center in Rosemont, Illinois, November 9th and 10th. Whether you're a game enthusiast or just looking for a fun weekend with the family, the Chicago Toy and Game Fair has it all. And like I said, the Reading with Your Kids podcast will be there, and you may have a chance to be heard on the show. Get your tickets today and bring the magic of play to life. Visit shytag.com for details, and be sure to use the discount code READ, R-E-A-D, at checkout to save on tickets. Join us right now from the beautiful state of North Carolina. Our guest is here today to celebrate two great new graphic novels. First one's called Sophie, Jurassic, and Sophie, Frankenstein's Hound. Please welcome to the show the author, the illustrator, Brian Anderson. Hey, Brian, how are you?
Good. I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you on. I just discovered that Brian, before he moved down to North Carolina, was a Massachusetts native, and so we've just had a great time chatting about Boston and Worcester, Massachusetts, and Salem, Massachusetts, and how different it is down south.
Big difference. Yeah, I'm a born and bred woo rat, so still in me.
That's good. That's great. And does any of that Worcester influence appear in your graphic novels?
Yeah, I mean, because when this started as a syndicated comic strip, I started back in 2005, and it was based on my dog. Well, I've been working on two other strips and didn't like them. Didn't want to commit to them because it's a long commitment, big commitment. And then I was really frustrated one day just while playing with my dog. The whole idea came to me. And 2 years later, I had my son. So that was Doug. His real name's Liam, but it became a documentary. So all the locations, all the toys, everything in the strip, and now the graphic novels was stuff we had around the house. So yeah, it all works its way in. It's basically taking real life and just translating it into kind of a fun scenario.
Yeah. Comics. I've talked about this a couple of times. There was such a huge part of our lives, getting up in the morning and opening up the Globe or the Herald and going right to the comic section.
Yeah, that's what I grew up on. I was lucky that my grandmother saved my dad's comic book collection. So I had access to, I knew the Peanuts very young in the paper, but he had the original first collection of the 1950s Peanuts, which is a very, very different comic and very, very different feel. So I got exposed to that in probably third grade, and that changed my whole perspective on comics in general going forward. Because that was a very kind of a dark, introspective, I hate to say it, but it was kind of depressing comic. So that always shaped me going forward when I knew I was going to draw and write comics. I was never just writing gags.
Mm-hmm.
There always had to be something in there. The characters really had to be alive and be their own thing. So yeah, and then from there, obviously getting into comic books and everything else, just follow. But that's still, I think I just posted about it on Instagram, the actual book that I still have, my dad's book. He had that, and he had the original Pogo collection.
Wow.
So yeah, I was very fortunate because you don't get exposed to that,
Mm-hmm.
The old stuff. You always kind of poo-poo it. It's old. It's not good, and that's furthest thing from the truth.
Absolutely, yeah. Wow, I did not know that Peanuts was had a dark period.
Yeah, when he started, excuse me, it was the way he drew it too was beautiful. That's my favorite Snoopy, my favorite way he drew, and it was very much, Charlie Brown really was him, and it was kind of that anxiety-ridden kid, and kind of a depressed kid, and that comes through in those early comics, whereas later on, it's still there, but it's more playful. It's more kid-friendly, I guess you could say. Snoopy's more developed into he's got his imagination and all that, and the characters kind of have their symbiosis that everybody kind of knows and loves, and you see in the movie. But if you go back and read those books, and they just I think it was Dark Horse re-released them, all the original comics. They're just breathtaking. Art-wise, writing-wise, the whole 9 yards. So yeah, I recommend that to everybody.
I'm wondering if that type of writing, since there's so many kids dealing with anxiety and depression these days, that's all we hear about. Maybe that, that character would be more relatable to those kids, and maybe that could help them get out of their funk.
I think it's also why Charlie Brown's still around. Because it is still there.
Mm-hmm.
It's more vibrant now and alive, but it's still there. And there's that connection. That's why Charlie Brown Snoopy will never go away, because that's always been kind of my driving goal, was to establish that connection. Not just do fun drawings and cool oh, this is cool, this is cool, this is funny. But always pushing for that connection to your readers. And that's the one thing I was very grateful for with branching out into graphic novels from newspapers, is that I had the opportunity to really explore a long form story. Now it's very hard in a daily strip to do long form stories or really dig into kind of subject matter. So I was able to frame these books, Sophie's journey. Each book has an overall arc as she's growing and developing. And then each chapter deals with, so I have those themes in my head when I start, and then you just kind of let the fun and the characters have fun. So it is funny. That's, the big thing I get back from readers. They're laughing, and they may not even realize why they're connecting. It's because they're connecting with Sophie. She goes through the same stages as kids, and, that's why people identify with her, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The jealousy of a new baby brother, wanting to be in control of the pack, but not understanding how that actually works, and then having all these problems that kids go through. In the new book that I'm writing now, the fourth book, it's about her coming to that realization that there's this huge world outside of your backyard, and that's really, really scary. So how does she deal with that? And then it's just a matter of doing the fun stuff I did in the comic strip, the imagination journeys, the cats trying to take over the world. And you still have that silly, ridiculous fun, but at the same time, you're kind of marching developmentally. The characters are marching towards kind of an end goal. So the readers get to go along with that kind of journey, something they can identify with.
Yeah. I'm curious, as you're creating the graphic novel, are you sitting down and writing out the story first and then tackling the illustrations, or are you kind of going in long form with your handwriting, just drawing in the word bubbles and sketching out a little thing and then going to the next frame and the next frame?
Yeah, I do it the way I teach kids, when I give my presentations and stuff. I try to take the mystery out of all of it. So I share with them how I do it. And there are obviously rules or guidelines you follow to creating a story, which I help them with, so it's not a mystery. But at the same time, there are no rules to how you go about coming up with that finished story. Writing is rewriting. So once you take away that thing, especially when you're a kid and you're frustrated, like I was with drawing and stuff as a kid and it wasn't good, you realize the first things you put down, the first things you write are supposed to be bad. They're supposed to be garbage. They're supposed to be awful, Once you can let go of that, then you're having fun. So what I do is I like to write everything, even with novels, I write them longhand first. So the comic strip is the same way. I, encourage kids too to do this. I carry a notebook with me everywhere. And then it's just a matter of writing and drawing simultaneously. It's just going, just dumping everything in your head. Just get it all out. And don't worry about, that's the hardest thing, overcoming that inner critic. Uh-huh. And one thing I share with the kids, especially with drawing, is something I read. Tim Burton is one of my favorites. And in an interview years ago, I read he got frustrated. So what he would do is he would draw with his other hand. He would switch hands because it was supposed to be bad. So his brain wasn't criticizing him anymore because, that's not the hand we draw with. This is going to be garbage. His inner critic shut off. And so it's one of the exercises I do with kids, and I do it all the time. I normally draw left-handed, so I switch to my right hand, and I draw right-handed.
Wow.
And it completely, your brain it's wild. It's a lot of fun. You produce a lot of really bad drawings, and some of them are even fun because they're so bad. But there's this freedom that comes from that, and I think that's the important thing. That's the thing, the key, especially when I'm teaching kids and talking to kids. That's what I want to get down to. You can spend the rest of your life reading books on structure and story structure and how to create a scene and conflict scenes and resolution scenes and all the craft of writing. But at the beginning, you just want to get to that pure essence, get rid of all this stuff that can slow you down. So the biggest thing is carry a notebook with you everywhere and always be doodling and writing.
That's great advice.
And it should be bad. It should be awful. And you don't have to worry about it because no one will ever see it. It doesn't matter. And once you get comfortable with that, it's about being comfortable in uncomfortable situations, which I think is the root of a lot of anxiety today. I was lucky. I grew up, doing hockey and then doing martial arts and competing in martial arts. And that's the one thing, you get humbled really quickly, number one. But number two, you spend most of your time in horrifically uncomfortable positions. And you're trained at a young age how to make yourself comfortable in those situations. That's a huge advantage because I think that's what's missing a lot is the anxiety comes from you're uncomfortable in an uncomfortable position like you should naturally be. But if you have some sort of outlet where you can train, where you can learn to be comfortable, how do you get comfortable in those situations? Martial arts obviously is a phenomenal way to do it, and kids that do that at an early age have a huge advantage. But yeah, that's kind of what I really try to, especially when I talk with kids and stuff, is getting, you see that you sometimes think, these writers, they were born and someone told them, don't worry, you're going to be a successful writer. So just hang out till you get there. Uh-huh. And the big analogy I give them is, I love this analogy. I ask them if, are any kids here, are their parents carpenters or do they, build homes, stuff like that? I'm like, oh yeah, there's always some. And I'm like, your your mom or your dad can build a staircase, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, we know what a staircase is. We've all seen them. We all use them. But if we went to Lowe's and bought a bunch of equipment and wood and power tools, we might be able to put something together that looks like a staircase, right? But who would want to walk on it? It's not going to be safe. Mm-hmm. But like I tell them, your parents that build houses, they weren't born knowing how to like build that staircase. They had to learn the craft of building that staircase. So they had to learn how to use the individual power tools, how to measure and do all these things. And writing and drawing is the same thing. It's a trade. Mm-hmm. So there's no secret that you're not just born able to do it. If you put it's exactly the same as becoming a carpenter. You're just learning different tools, but you're putting the same amount of time in and experience, and you get there. That one helps a lot because that now they have a frame of reference of, oh, it's not this mysterious thing. You're born with this super talent that you can just do it. That's not true. You have to put the work into learning the craft and constantly learning the craft. It never ends, Yeah. So
I think that's a real important lesson for kids. That idea that you're not going to be great at first, and we accept it when we start playing sports. It's like, yeah I'm on pee-wee hockey here, and I'm going to fall down, and it's not going to. But someday I'm going to be like the kids in high school that I look up to.
Yeah. And it's a tough lesson. And with the sports, it's tough because like I said, I grew up playing hockey, and the one difference is in sports, there's always going to be that outlier. I had a teammate that was drafted out of high school by the Ottawa Senators. But when we would play, it was so blatantly obvious how much better he was. And we were at one of the best high schools in the country for hockey. But he was, if he wanted to, every play, he could take it from net to net and score if he wanted to. So you do realize there are outliers. So it can be confusing for kids when they see that level of talent. They're like, oh, that person is just that. Yes, that's true. That's going to happen. But at the same time, that person, that player, you look at a LeBron James or one of these famous athletes, yes, they have a lot of natural talent. But what you also have to look at, which they can't show you because you'd have to film 10,000 hours of them training. They still had to go through the same process that you were going to have to go through.
Right.
Even if it doesn't matter if you don't have the same level of talent, you can still put the same amount of work in, and you can still get there. You got to look at that side. Don't look at the end result of these super talents. Figure out how they got there, So, yeah, that's the important thing.
Do you ever get when you're talking like this, and I absolutely agree with you. I made a living doing educational magic shows for 35 years and travel all over the country in Central America and the Caribbean, and I understood that where I am on stage now is a lot different than it was when I was 35 years ago, and some of those videos I haven't looked at for a long time because it's embarrassing. But I run into people who are like, we're artists, but they have that kind of attitude like, oh, I'm an artist, and no, I'm not a construction worker. And I don't know. Do you ever run into those folks who kind of criticize you for saying, no, we're artists. We're not out here.
No, I don't. What I run into, and this is funny you say that, I've been a magician since second grade. And I learned, this is a valuable lesson from being a magician for a long time, was that I learned too, and you don't know this doing magic, as magicians, what happens? We miss the point. We start trying to fool each other, and we start criticizing each other on, like David Blaine, when he came out, magicians were like, I can go buy some of those tricks for $10, $20 and perform them. What's the big deal? We're missing the point. It's not how, like using magic as an analogy, it's not how you do the trick, because that'll be disappointing to everybody. As a magician, your only goal is to create that moment of astonishment. That's it. How you get there doesn't matter. I don't care if you had to spend 1,500 hours practicing a sleight. Or did you just buy a $10 trick that you can do? It's a beginner level trick. If it gets that level of astonishment in your audience, that's the goal.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
And in a community like magicians, and the same with artists, we can get caught up in they're using Photoshop. Oh, they're doing this. They're not drawing it by hand. They're not using this particular pen or this particular nib. It's the end result. You're entertaining so however you get there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I think that's an important lesson too. You can lose sight of that the longer you do something.
Right.
You get caught up in the methods and then that elitism, you know. But within the art world, I haven't really I don't deal in the fine art world.
Mm-hmm.
I did run into that in college with art professors, where there wasn't some deeper, you couldn't explain some deeper philosophical meaning behind your art. You weren't an artist. If you were wanting to do comics, you weren't really an artist. There was that.
Yeah.
But that's kind of a different world. So, yeah, within comics and comic books, you never really, that's the nice thing about that. You never run into that.
Yeah. You know, it's funny you talking about magic, and I was lucky. I didn't do my first magic trick until I was 26.
Oh, wow.
Because my intention was going in, was to be a clown. And that was my passion. And, the teachers the kids loved slapstick when I'm falling off the stage, falling out of chairs and hitting myself in the head. The kids loved it. Teachers and the people who hired me, not so much. So, a gentleman at Jack's Joke Shop in downtown Boston introduced me to a sponge ball trick. And I was amazed because I was able to tell a story with that and do a skit. And, so that's how I ended up falling in love with magic. My kids got into it because I was doing it. My kids got into it and went to the magic clubs. And I remember there was this one day I was doing a card force, and I'd been using it on stage for years, and it was great. And it was just a simple moment of a bigger story that was, 5, 6, 7 minutes long. And my son turned to me one day and he said, "You were such a lazy magician. That's the simplest force in the world. You could do it this way. You could do it that way." And I'm like, dude, why am I going to my knuckles? It does the job. That's not the point.
You lose sight of that and also you lose sight of, one of my favorite tricks is the crazy man's handcuffs. And I stopped performing that in 5th grade because I had done it thousands of times. To me, it was boring. Mm-hmm. But I recently started doing rubber band magic again. One, because I started doing mentalism in college, but when you're doing kids events and stuff and talking to kids and they want to see magic, they don't want to see key bending and, but that crazy man handcuffs, even though I've seen it 10,000 times and it's boring to me, that moment when they see those rubber bands come apart, the looks are priceless. And you go, oh, that's what it's about.
Right.
That's the whole thing. So if there's one trick that creates that kind of moment, why wouldn't you do it forever, even though you couldn't care less about the trick?
Right.
You get lost in that moment of creating it never gets old, You got to, I guess, you refine the love in the art, mm-hmm. And that's a hard lesson. Kids don't identify with it because they haven't been doing it that long.
Right.
Parents can. And that's something they can definitely share with their kids is like, yeah, you might love this now. It's going to take a lot of hard work. There are going to be times where you're going to want to quit. You're just not going to like it anymore. You got to just keep reminding yourself, why am I doing this? Is that still there? Is that passion still there? And if it is, then you keep going,
We should probably tell our listeners a little bit about what Sophie Jurassic Bark is all about.
It's about, this is why I love dogs. All of it came from my dog, Sophie. Mm-hmm. She's the whole reason all of this exists. Like I said before, I had been working on 2 other strips I was going to syndicate. And in a moment of frustration where I didn't want to do these strips, I didn't like them. I didn't want to commit to doing them. Playing with Sophie, the whole entire idea came in a moment. The title, the idea. I made up the baby at first. And then, it went from there. And I knew going into newspaper syndication, papers are dying. I knew that. So I had always had plans to expand on Sophie. But that industry is rough and it was brutal. And I went through those times where it wasn't what I thought it was. There was a lot of shenanigans, let's put it that way. And it came to a crossroads. I could fight the syndicate legally, which is, just that tired old story of artists getting taken advantage of. What do? Can you spend your life savings fighting back? Or you could quit. I didn't like either option. So a couple years ago, I just decided, you know what, I'm going to do what I'd always wanted to do with Sophie, which was escape from the 4-panel limitations of newspaper strips, which keep getting smaller and smaller. And I just drew up a plan. The plan was we're going to break them out into graphic novels and animation. And it was really hard. It was a really low point, but I had to put the plan together and executed the plan. And I was fortunate enough to find a publisher, that Marvel Press, that believed in it, wasn't just going to throw it against the wall and hope for the best. They bet the farm on these, Sophie. And I think part of it was Sophie's all I have left of Sophie. I have my other foster dogs and my foster cats and my, adopted cats. And the other thing with Sophie, with these graphic novels, people will see is that they're all in there. All those characters are real. Nothing's in that sense made up. Those are my real cats. Those are my real dogs. There's stories about the foster dogs. And it's about them experiencing life in their world and using their imagination sometimes to go off and kind of figure out how do we navigate this life that we're dealt. And at the same time, the fun part of it that I loved about the comic strip, and now that we're getting feedback on the graphic novels, that it's still there, which makes me happy, is that it's not just a book you hand to your kids, here, read this. It's the next cool thing. Parents love it as much as kids. My audience in the newspapers were mostly newspaper readers who were mostly over 65.
Right.
And so most of my young readers came from grandparents and parents reading the comic strip to their kids. And then kids who had never seen a newspaper were finding Sophie online and finding the collections of the strips and stuff. So I was getting fan mail from kids that had never held a newspaper in their hands, but they loved Sophie. So what I wanted to do with these books is really let the characters loose. They weren't confined. It's like putting a dog in a kennel. That newspaper strip was a kennel. And now I can do a full page splash. I can do kind of like old timey comics could do. You get the whole page and you can tell a longer story.
Yeah.
And I think that's what is really going to draw kids more and parents more to the stories is there's jokes in there for the kids. They're going to relate to Sophie because she's them, the same age. But there's pop culture references. There's Monty Python jokes. There's, so it's kind of like that in magic where you have that dual reality. Your spectator is experiencing the trick one way and the audience is seeing something different. And that really gets me going when I hear back from parents saying they loved reading it and then gave it to their kids, So, that's the fun of it. And getting to do it in full color. But at the heart of it, it really is, it's about the journey of growing up. And it's my tribute to dogs, the good and the bad, so.
That's really, one of the mistakes I made with my son, who called me a lazy magician, was I didn't appreciate the fact that, when he was devouring graphic novels and anime, that he was reading.
Yeah.
I supported it. I bought him, took him to the comic shops and bought him comics and whatnot. But every once in a while I would go into his room and go, dude, can you please read a book without a picture? I hope parents don't make that mistake because graphic novels, there's great stories, there's great reading, great writing in graphic novels. And, I think my son was a very early reader, so I'm hesitant to say that he was a reluctant reader. But I have a feeling there was a time in his life where, reading the big novels, it just didn't do it for him. But reading the graphic novels, reading the comics, the anime really kept him engaged with reading. And so I'm really happy for that.
That's the key. That's what I tell parents all the time. Comics are a gateway to reading. It's all about, people forget books used to be fully illustrated all the time. Then they got kind of a form of elitism that got away from that. But at the end of the day, find out what your kid likes to read. Expose them to everything. They're going to find their niche, They may not like, to me, I know people that only like to read biographies, which is wild to me, but you know what? They found their thing. But if kids are forced to read kind of the standard books that are boring and, they just, they have to struggle through it, that's going to turn them off so fast.
Yeah.
Whereas if they get exposed to, say, Neil Gaiman's Sandman, like I was in 1989, that's a game changer. That's like, whoa, you can do this in comics? And then they're going to start exploring on their own. It's not up to you to find that. They're going to find it. But as long as you don't cut that pathway off by making them read these stale classics from the 1800s that they're like, you don't know what's going to do it. Maybe they're like thrillers. Maybe they're like mysteries, it's just about letting them explore different types of books. And comics are such a great way because they'll get engaged right away a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Especially with boys being more visual, it's a big help because boys tend to be the more reluctant readers. So comics are phenomenal for that. Let them try manga. Let them try whatever.
Yeah.
And you'll get them hooked really, really fast.
Yeah. Well, let's take a minute to tell everybody where they can go to find out more about Sophie and find out more about you.
You can go to dogeatdoug.com, which is the original site for the strip. That also points to brianandersonwriter.com, both the same site. I'm Dog Eat Doug Comics online on Instagram, and my publisher is Marvel Press. So you can find more about the Sophie books there. But my main website's the big one, and Dog Eat Doug Comics on Instagram. I post comics every day so they can get a real feel for, what they're in store for when they read the books.
That's very cool. We've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator of Sophie, Jurassic Bark, and Sophie Frankenstein's Hound. Our guest has been Brian Anderson. Brian, thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. This was an absolute blast.
Hey, are you ready to ignite a passion for reading in your students? Introducing bookandauthor.com, your gateway to literacy connections. With bookandauthor.com, connecting your school with talented authors of captivating kids' books has never been easier. Simply visit our user-friendly website and explore our extensive database of authors. Filter your search based on budget, genre, and availability. Discover the perfect match for your school and your students. But that's not all. With bookandauthor.com, you have the power to request a proposal. Let vetted authors come to you with their tailored ideas, ensuring an unforgettable literacy experience for your students. Don't wait any longer to inspire young minds through the magic of books. Visit bookandauthor.com today and open the door to a world of literacy connections. Bookandauthor.com, where literacy comes to life. Join us right now from beautiful Southern California. Our guest is here today to celebrate her new book. It's called Birthday Soup. Please welcome to the show, Grace Seo Chang. Hey, Grace, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I love soup. I absolutely love soup. And I want to talk about the book. It's bringing up so many, because when I travel, I always try soup, and it's just so wonderful. Sometimes I'm really disappointed. Otherwise, so I love to hear about this book and this tradition.
Yeah, I mean, birthday soup is based off of a Korean tradition that we have and on our birthdays, we eat mireokguk. It's a seaweed soup, and sometimes there's meat in it, sometimes there's seafood, but it's so delicious. You usually eat it with a bowl of rice, and then as you get older and you become accustomed to kimchi, sometimes you like kimchi, and no, mireokguk. I grew up, I adore it, I love it. It's a tradition I share with my kids. I also make sure my family's eating it, so yeah.
And you pronounce the soup miyoko?
Mireokguk.
Myeokguk.
Yeah, so miyok is seaweed, and then guk is anything that's soup. So if it's chicken soup, I'm so sorry about that. If it's chicken soup, it's like hakguk, or I don't know. But yeah, it's miyokguk is seaweed soup.
Wow. We've hosted international kids here in our home over the years, and a lot of them have come to us from China. And and they all become part of our family. And for my birthday, Sophia, that was the name she chose to use here. She told me about this tradition that on your birthday, you get a long noodle soup, and it's a soup, but there's like this giant noodle in it, and that represents how long a life you'll live.
Yes.
And she was making the noodle from scratch, and she was a really great cook, but usually something went wrong. And when the soup was finished, there are all these little pieces of noodle in the bowl, and it fell apart, and she was so disappointed, and she's like, this doesn't mean I want you to die early. It's really long when you put it together.
Yeah, no, it's so special. I love hearing that because, food has there's so many traditions behind food for so many different cultures. And, writing birthday soup, I was just really excited to share just one part of the Korean culture that I just find so near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that we talk about here on the podcast is helping our kids understand that the world is made up of lots of different cultures and cultures within cultures. I think here in the States, when we think of Latin America, we think of this umbrella, and everybody who speaks Spanish fits underneath that umbrella. We think about Africa. We don't realize there's a number of different countries and cultures, and the same with Asia. I think we don't understand that Chinese culture is different from Korean culture, which is different than Vietnamese culture, that's different than the Filipino culture.
Yeah, I mean, it's what makes our world so amazing, right? Is just there's so many different pockets of cultures within the continents and within each country themselves, right? Because you look at America as a whole, while we're America, you have, the coast, and then you have the Midwest, and then you have the South, and every part, and the same goes for Korea. I mean, Korea is divided into North and South Korea, and those are two very different countries. And yeah, it can be very complicated at times, but it's also just a part of history. And what I guess makes it also so special too is that there are so many intricacies to every culture.
You're right about there being different cultures here in the States. I always thought I loved barbecue, and I ate it here in Boston. Then I started traveling down south and out to the Midwest, and I come home to Boston. I go, we don't know how to do barbecue here.
No, I grew up in Seattle, and so growing up, I had the Pacific Northwest oysters, and then when I moved to New York, I tried the East Coast oysters, and I couldn't go back to Pacific Northwest, but both really good. But it's funny how that happens.
Yeah. We love that books can be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And obviously, I'm imagining it would be a lot of fun for a kid from a Korean family to be able to see this story and say, yeah, we do that. We do that. That's so cool. But I think it's equally important for my kids who are Puerto Rican, and I have Puerto Rican Irish backgrounds, to be able to take a look into a Korean family and see some of their culture.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's something that my husband and I are always thinking about, is how to continued to introduce new cultures and new traditions to, our children. Really what inspired this story is first, on my husband's show, Ugly Delicious. We filmed it when I was pregnant with my first son. We were cooking miyeokguk with my mom and his mom. Unfortunately, who's no longer with us. But in that moment, it was just so special to see my mom and his mom and me being pregnant, us cooking miyeokguk together, right? Because the story behind miyeokguk is after the mother gives birth, for the first, 100 days it used to be, she would eat miyeokguk just to make sure she's, getting nourished and she's able to recover really well. And so that kind of lifted the idea to share the story behind miyeokguk. And then the other part is, growing, now that I'm a mom and now I have young children, I find myself reflecting a lot about my own childhood. And, when I was 2, I loved Korean food. I would eat it all the time. And there's that moment, especially growing up in an immigrant family, where you realize, oh, wait, the food that I eat might not be the same food that, my friend eats. And, you kind of see Maya go through that moment where she's not sure, is this something that I can embrace or even share with my friends? And I think that, that I think is somewhat universal for all kids that come from different backgrounds and cultures. That moment where like, oh wait, this is a little different than, what my friend is doing at home. And is it okay? And it's certainly okay. And it's actually, so wonderful. And you don't realize it until you're much older. But, for young kids, the hope is that they're like, oh yeah, it's okay to not be sure. But at the end of the day, it's something so special for our family. And, that's the hope.
Yeah, no. When my son was in kindergarten, in Puerto Rican tradition, they celebrate Christmas, but then 12 days later, they celebrate what they call Three Kings Day. Lots of folks call it the Feast of the Epiphany. And that is the day traditionally that is believed the three kings went to visit Jesus. And in Puerto Rican culture, if you fill up a shoebox with hay or grass, you do that because the three kings will come in, feed their camels, and then leave gifts for the kids. So my son went into kindergarten, and he was showing off his Three Kings Day gifts. And the other kids in his class were so angry that they didn't get anything from the Three Kings. And we're getting all these phone calls from parents going, well, what is this? We just did Christmas. What do you mean I have to give kids another gift here?
That's amazing. It's so special. It's so true. And especially right around the holidays, it's every culture is so different. And, right, you have Hanukkah where you get a gift every day. So and you also have Christmas where it's just one day. And I love that with Puerto Rican culture that you have another day where the three kings come and they also give gifts. And
yeah. It's really, we've really embraced, and I hope that other families will be open to it. As I mentioned, we've hosted international kids in our home, and our friends and our extended family of chosen friends comes from all over the world. And on right here in the studio used to be our big room, and we would celebrate Thanksgiving here. And there was one Thanksgiving with 35 people around the table, and there were at least 5 different languages happening and different recipes from all over the world. It was great.
I love that. And, especially in Birthday Soup, you see, a blend of cultures happening with Maya's Korean tradition and also, her living here, a lot of Western traditions, say the birthday cake. And, that's something also, I love that you bring that up, that we're thinking about now that at the end of the day, I am Korean, but I'm very much American. And now that I have young kids, I see that, they're even more American than I am. And, but we're so mindful of introducing really important parts of Korean culture. And then, we also have family members that are not Korean or not, and it's also in introducing those cultures. And I just love to hear your story that, you have 5 different languages going on at one dinner table.
It was, and there were different, dishes and different recipes. And, I think it's just such a gift that we can give to ourselves, obviously, but also to our kids, helping them understand that they belong to this world where, well, everybody belongs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you.
I'm thinking that some people out there listening to this, and when they hear you talking that this birthday soup is a seaweed soup, they might be going,
Yeah.
And I've had seaweed. Not my favorite thing, but it's certainly not something that you turn your nose up to.
No. And, that was, I think, the whole thought process behind making birthday soup is, it's really incredible, especially for me now. Growing up, one thing that I never thought would be in anyone's periphery is even Korean barbecue, right? And now people love Korean barbecue, and now people know what kimchi is for the most part. And like so many other cultures, there's so many layers to food tradition, and seaweed is such an important part of Korean cuisine and Korean food. Dried seaweed. Now I'll go to the grocery store and I see packets of dried seaweed, and kids are eating it as snacks. And it just blows, my husband and I talk about all the time, it blows our mind that now, we see 3-year-olds asking for seaweed, and, they're not even Korean, and it's amazing. And, miyeokguk, it's growing up with it. Of course, I find it so yummy and so delicious, but, it's just incredible, to see that, right. Hopefully over time, people will be like, oh, well, there's seaweed soup and there's a recipe in the back. And if you are so inclined to make it, you can try it. If you don't like it, that's totally okay. But maybe you will. And if by chance you do, that's so exciting for every culture for the most part, right? Not just even Korean culture, every culture to know, oh, right, I can try this thing. And it's okay if I don't like it today. But at least I tried it. And yeah.
I'm telling you, I'm amazed when I go into Costco and you can buy a big pallet package of seaweed now.
Yes, it's amazing. And we buy that seaweed all the time. It's our kids' favorite.
Now, you glossed over a couple things that I would be remiss if I didn't point out. You mentioned that your husband has a TV show.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, my husband, this is a TV show he made. It's on Netflix. It's called Ugly Delicious. And, I personally love the show. He uses food as a segue to talk about all different things in the world, right? Whether it's personal stories, whether it's politics, whether it's technology, whatever it is. And one of the things that we did was I happened to be pregnant, and we just thought it'd be such an interesting place to talk about chefs who go through this life-changing experience of having kids. And it was really special because I think we were able to capture him and his mother, again, who's no longer with us. She battled 25 years of cancer, and, she's a survivor in her own right. And if you haven't checked it out, I think it'd be fun for people to check out too. It's on Netflix.
And you kind of broke up. It's ugly but delicious. Did I say that?
Oh,
right?
It's Ugly Delicious.
Ugly Delicious.
Yeah.
Okay. It's going on my watch list, my wish list. You also mentioned that there's a recipe in the back of the book, but it's not just the recipe that we could have found in Reader's Digest. This is kind of a pretty fancy recipe.
Yeah, and so in the back there's 2 recipes. There's one that from my husband, and he wants to make it very clear it's not the traditional miyeokguk recipe at all. And then we have my mom's recipe, also not traditional at all. And the reason was because if you do go online, you can find traditional miyeokguk recipes. And the great thing about miyeokguk is because it's so personal for every family, every family has their own little take on how they make it. And so the two recipes in the back, one includes beef, which is fairly common, but Dave kind of does his own take on it, my husband. And then my mom, she found a way to make it, I guess, vegan. Not intentionally, but it's just potatoes and it's the seaweed broth. But it's great. So, just to be mindful that there's people with different dietary needs and restrictions. And I just thought it was a fun way to introduce something that my mom even cooked for my own kids. Because they didn't like the chew of the meat when they were, just turning 1 year old. So potato was a little softer for them.
Oh. How does your mom feel about seeing her recipe in a book?
I mean, she's so excited that this book is out there. And I think at the same time, it's special for her now that she has grandkids, that there's a part of her that's in this book. And yeah, so it's special.
Yeah. And this is your debut book. What does that feel like? How does that, exciting is that for you?
It's surreal. It's so exciting. It is really exciting. On top of everything we talked about, proceeds from this book, my portion of the proceeds, I'm planning to donate to Every Mother Counts. And that's, this great organization that really helps mothers in underserved countries and underserved areas where, they might not have great access to healthcare. And so in that sense, I hope that this book also brings light to, so many parts of motherhood and celebration that are so amazing. But it's great. I'm so excited. It's out there.
Yeah. And now that it's out there and you are officially a children's book author, are there going to be more Korean traditions shared in future books from you?
I hope so. There's so many parts, and there's also so many amazing authors right now out there, and I just love that more and more we see so many great children's authors talk about different cultures, and I hope I could create more books. And my husband and I have also talked about doing other books, children's books together, and so it'll be fun. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm imagining this would be so much fun for a family. One of the things we used to like to do when we read, my kids are now adults, but when they were young and we'd read a book about a different culture, we would try to learn more about the culture, go beyond that book and try a recipe from, and it's great that the recipe is in your book. You can just go out and try that, but also read some other books and see some other shows and go. We used to go online when Google Maps first came out. Mm-hmm. We would try to type in, let's go to that place in the world, and it would be so much fun.
I love that. No, that's the best part about having kids. I feel like it just breathes a new excitement to explore different things that you might not have done just selfishly as 20-something-year-old. And it's great. And I'm just so excited it's out there. I'm so excited that I hope people are excited about it. And it's surreal. It is surreal.
Yeah. So we have our listeners have a lot of homework to do right now. I want them to check out the Ugly Delicious, your husband's TV show. We're going to want them to check out I'm going to ask you for the website, but I also want them to check out that organization that you're supporting with your donation. So do you know if there's a website that people can go to?
Yes, it's called everymothercounts.org. And they're just doing amazing work, and they're just making sure mothers in underserved areas are getting the right care they need to give safe and healthy births to their children.
That's certainly is a wonderful mission, and we urge people to check it out, see if it's something that you want to support. Now, where can we go to learn more about you and more about Birthday Soup?
Well, Birthday Soup is everywhere. It's available everywhere. And Yeah, I'm so excited. And if you happen to be in Los Angeles, I'll have a book signing and I'll be sure to share more about that as that comes along.
Wonderful. We've had a really fun time speaking to the author of Birthday Soup. It's the debut book from our guest, Grace Seo Chang. Grace, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Jed.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, @readingwithyourkids on Instagram, and @JedleyMagic on Twitter. Please visit our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And of course, we'd love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. I want to start by thanking our guest, Brian Anderson. Be sure to check out his Sophie graphic novels. And also Grace Seo Chang. Please be sure to celebrate Birthday Soup. What a great idea. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady, Raylene Tang. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us today. And thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.